The Celestial Academy on Valdris Prime educated the daughters of the galaxy's ruling families. For 3 centuries, it had maintained standards that ensured only those destined to govern worlds or shape civilizations received its prestigious instruction. 12-year-old Ethan Cole was absolutely, completely, obviously out of place. He stood in the entrance hall trying not to look as terrified as he felt, while alien princesses from a dozen species processed their arrival with the kind of effortless grace that came from lifetimes of diplomatic training. They moved like they owned space itself, conversations flowing in languages Ethan's translator implant struggled to process, their bearing suggesting they'd been born understanding they were important. Ethan had been born in a small colony on Kepler 442b and selected for this exchange program because his diplomat mother believed early cultural immersion would serve humanity's integration into galactic society. Also, his test scores were good. Neither of those facts made him feel less like he'd been dropped into the deep end of a pool he hadn't known existed. Ethan Cole. A Valdrian administrator approached, their crystalline features arranged in what the Academy's orientation materials suggested was professional courtesy. Welcome to the Celestial Academy. Your quarters have been prepared in the human-compatible wing. Classes begin tomorrow. Thank you, Ethan managed, trying to remember the formal phrases his mother had drilled into him. I'm honored by the opportunity. The administrator's expression shifted in ways Ethan couldn't interpret. Indeed, your presence represents unprecedented cultural exchange. We expect you'll find the curriculum challenging. That turned out to be masterful understatement. The first weeks were a blur of being perpetually confused while trying to hide it. The Academy's curriculum assumed students would eventually rule worlds. Lessons covered statecraft, military strategy, resource allocation across planetary populations, and diplomatic protocols for species Ethan had barely heard of. His classmates were alien princesses ranging from early adolescence to young adulthood by their species standards. All nobility, all preparing for destinies involving authority and responsibility beyond anything humans typically experienced at comparable ages. And then there was Ethan, who'd thought being good at math and knowing some basic diplomatic courtesy qualified him for this. The other students treated him with everything from polite curiosity to dismissive superiority. He was younger than most, lacked any royal bloodline, and his species barely registered in galactic politics. Several students made clear they considered his admission a dilution of the Academy's prestige, charity case whose presence they tolerated rather than welcomed. But one student watched him differently. Princess Kyrith Nethara of the Valtheran throne was exactly what Ethan expected from alien royalty. Composed, strategic, maintaining perfect diplomatic bearing in every interaction. Her species looked humanoid enough that Ethan could read some expressions, though her elongated ears and luminescent skin marked her as clearly not human. She never spoke to him directly during those first weeks, but Ethan noticed her watching during lessons, her gray eyes tracking him with focus that felt different from the casual curiosity other students showed. He couldn't figure out why someone so obviously important would bother paying attention to him at all. The Academy's social hierarchy established itself quickly. Most students decided Ethan was interesting novelty, but ultimately unimportant. His lack of status, his species' political insignificance, and his obvious struggle with curriculum designed for future rulers made him easy to categorize as not worth serious attention. A few actively resented his presence. Princess Salith of the Kronar Empire made her position clear during a tactical strategy lesson where students simulated governing crisis situations. The human's approach is hopelessly naive, she announced after Ethan suggested prioritizing civilian evacuation over securing strategic resources during a planetary disaster scenario. He doesn't understand that leadership requires hard choices. Sentiment doesn't govern empires. Sentiment, Ethan's frustration overcame his usual caution about drawing attention. I suggested saving people's lives. That's not sentiment. It's the entire point of governance. The point of governance is maintaining stability and power. Individual lives matter less than systemic survival. Salith's tone suggested she was explaining obvious facts to someone too ignorant to understand them. Then what's the system for? Ethan asked. If it's not for protecting the people who live in it. The instructor interrupted before the argument could escalate, but Ethan noticed Kyrith watching the exchange with unusual intensity. After class, she approached him for the first time. That was brave, she said simply. Challenging Salith publicly when she has actual political power and you don't. Most students avoid contradicting her. It wasn't brave, it was just, Ethan struggled to articulate it. Wrong. The whole point of having authority is supposed to be protecting people who can't protect themselves. Treating that like naive sentiment is backwards. Many in power would disagree with you. Then many in power are wrong. Something shifted in Kyrith's expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of something she hadn't expected. You really believe that? Yes. Most beings who attend this academy have been taught that power justifies itself. That authority creates its own legitimacy. You're suggesting authority needs to be justified by how it's used. She tilted her head slightly. That's unusual perspective for someone seeking to build political influence. I'm not seeking to build political influence. I'm just trying not to fail out while learning about species I barely understand. Ethan's honesty surprised himself, and trying to figure out why governance education seems to skip the part about actually caring about the people you're governing. Kyrith was quiet for a moment, then unexpectedly. You're struggling with the mathematics section of resource allocation, yes. I could help with that if you'd like. Ethan blinked. Why would you help me? Because you're the only student who questions whether power requires justification beyond its own existence. That perspective seems valuable enough to preserve, even if it requires helping you pass your courses. She said it matter-of-factly, like tutoring was strategic calculation rather than kindness. But Ethan accepted, and over the following weeks, he discovered that Kyrith was brilliant at teaching, patient, thorough, able to explain concepts in ways that made sense rather than just repeating textbook definitions. He also discovered she was funny when she dropped her formal bearing, deeply curious about human culture in ways that went beyond diplomatic necessity, and surprisingly lonely despite being surrounded by potential allies and political connections. Nobody here knows me, she admitted one evening after a particularly long tutoring session. They know Princess Kyrith Nethara, heir to Valtheran throne. They know my political positions and my family's strategic interests. But they don't know what I think about things that don't matter for governance, or what I find amusing, or whether I'm ever uncertain about decisions I make. You're uncertain. Ethan couldn't imagine someone so composed ever doubting herself. Constantly, but showing uncertainty is weakness in my culture, so I've learned to project absolute confidence regardless of internal state. She looked at him. You don't do that. You admit when you don't know things, when you're confused, when you need help. That's considered admirable in human culture. It's considered honest. Honesty is valued differently in royal education. We're taught that perception matters more than truth, and projecting strength matters more than admitting vulnerability. She smiled slightly. You're terrible at that. It's oddly refreshing. The incident that transformed Ethan's status happened during what should have been routine training exercise. Junior students, children of lesser nobility who attended the academy's lower schools, faced equipment malfunction during wilderness survival practicum, leaving several trapped in dangerous terrain. The academy's emergency response was delayed by bureaucratic protocols about proper authority chains. Ethan, who happened to be nearby during his free period, didn't wait for official permission. He found the trapped students, assessed the situation with whatever survival training Earth's education system had provided, and coordinated improvised rescue using available materials and practical problem-solving that completely disregarded proper procedures. By the time Academy officials arrived to handle the crisis properly, Ethan had already gotten the students to safety. The reaction was complicated. Some nobles were scandalized that a human with no rank had taken action without authorization. Others grudgingly respected his effectiveness while disapproving of his procedural violations. The rescued students and their families were simply grateful. Kyrith watched the aftermath with growing understanding. While other students debated whether Ethan's actions were appropriate given his lack of official authority, she recognized something more important. He'd acted based on what needed doing rather than what was politically safe. "You didn't hesitate," she said when she found him later, exhausted and still covered in dirt from the rescue. "You saw children in danger and immediately moved to help, without calculating political implications or worrying about exceeding your authority. They were kids, they needed help, nothing else mattered." Ethan said it like it was obvious, to you perhaps. But most students here would have first considered what helping meant for their political standing, whether intervention served their interests, what obligations successful rescue might create. Kyrith sat beside him. "You just helped because it was right. That's rare." "That's not rare. That's just being a decent person." "You'd be surprised how rare decent people are in positions of power, or how rare it is for people in power to act decently when it costs them something." She was quiet for a moment. "I've been trained my entire life to evaluate potential partners according to bloodline strength, political advantages, strategic dynasty building. You fail every traditional criterion." "Thanks." Ethan wasn't sure where this was going. "But watching you simply be kind and brave and genuine without calculation has made me aware that I've never met anyone who treats me as a person first. And that matters to me more than all the strategic considerations my training emphasizes." She met his eyes. "My parents would be horrified by this admission. You're human, politically insignificant, and attachment to you serves no strategic purpose. But I find myself not caring about strategic purposes when I'm around you." Ethan's brain took several seconds to process what she was actually saying. Do you mean?" "I mean that you're the only person at this academy who sees me rather than my title, who asks what I think about things that don't matter for governance, who treats kindness as more important than strategy." Her formal bearing had slipped into something more vulnerable. "And that I've developed feelings my training says are inappropriate, but that feel more real than any carefully calculated political relationship I've been encouraged to form. I'm 12," Ethan managed, "and human, and completely unqualified to be involved with alien royalty. I'm aware of all those facts. I'm mentioning my feelings anyway because you've taught me that honesty matters more than strategic calculation. And honestly, I can't stop watching you, can't stop noticing how you treat people with kindness regardless of their rank, can't stop being fascinated by someone who demonstrates courage without needing royal bloodline to validate it." Kyrith's family visited the academy for formal evaluation of her progress, and they were not pleased to discover their daughter had been spending time with the human student. The Valtheran concept of appropriate royal behavior was rigid. Relationships should serve political purposes, emotional attachment should strengthen dynasty, personal preference should be subordinate to strategic necessity. Her parents' position was clear. End the inappropriate association with the human. Focus on relationships with students from species that actually matter strategically. And remember that her personal feelings are less important than her future responsibilities as queen. Kyrith's response shocked them. She refused. "Ethan has taught me more about leadership in 6 months than years of traditional instruction," she told her parents with quiet certainty. "He's shown me that authority should be justified by how it's used rather than existing for its own sake. That kindness isn't weakness, and that caring about people beyond their strategic utility doesn't diminish effectiveness, it enhances it. He's human, her mother said, as if that explained everything wrong with the situation. His species is politically insignificant. He has no bloodline, and attachment to him serves no purpose in your eventual rule. He has character. He has courage. He has genuine warmth that makes people trust him without calculation or force. Those qualities matter for leadership as much as bloodline or political power. Kyrith stood her ground. If my future rule requires I sacrifice every genuine personal connection for strategic advantage, then maybe Valtheran traditions about royal behavior need reconsideration. Her parents were appalled by her rebellion against established protocols, but they were also intelligent enough to recognize that their daughter was demonstrating exactly the kind of strong-willed thinking that made effective rulers. They reluctantly allowed the friendship to continue, while making clear their expectations that Kyrith would eventually make proper strategic choices about partnerships. Kyrith accepted their terms while privately recognizing she had no intention of treating her feelings as childish phase to outgrow. Over the remaining years of academy education, Kyrith and Ethan developed relationship that challenged both their culture's assumptions. She learned that leadership includes empathy and that strength isn't diminished by caring. He learned that royalty doesn't preclude genuine humanity and that traditions can be questioned without destroying their valuable elements. When they eventually graduated, Kyrith as crown princess preparing for rule, Ethan as human representative building diplomatic bridges, they maintained the connection that had begun when an alien girl couldn't stop watching the human child who was kind and brave and genuine in ways that made her question everything her training taught her. Years later, when Kyrith took the throne and Ethan served as human ambassador to her court, their relationship became foundation for alliance that transformed how both species approached governance and diplomacy. The Academy's other students eventually understood that Ethan's significance wasn't about royal bloodline or political power. It was about demonstrating that character transcends status, that warmth and resilience matter as much as strategic calculation, and that sometimes the most important relationships form not because they serve political purposes, but because someone sees you clearly and values what they see. Kyrith became a better queen because a human child showed